Good morning. Welcome to the Finance Committee. It is Tuesday, December 8th at 10 a.m. And can you do a roll call, please, Karen? Yeah.
Councilmember Getzelt?
Here.
Mayor Kerr?
Here.
Dennis Allion?
Citizen Allian here.
Citizen? Roberto Moreno? And Jeff Hoyne?
I'm here.
Okay.
Great. So I would like to turn this over to Acting City Manager Hoyne to kick us off.
Good morning, everybody. I know this is kind of a unique time and a unique situation. It's going to be a unique budget committee meeting. The reason that I spoke with the mayor and others and kind of pressed for this is because of the last several months of COVID and because of some upcoming implications should we go into shelter in place again, which looks more likely than not, but we'll wait for direction from the state and the county. And the fact that we've transitioned so many administrative positions in the city, including a major portion of our financials to RGS. Of course, we're lucky to have Roberto Moreno remain on board with RGS for some historical perspective and just for some transitional stability. I thought it would be a good time, especially for staff, perhaps not so much for the rest of the committee, but for staff to get an eye on where we're at with the audit, since it is running a little bit late. Also, why, in the spirit of transparency and letting the community know and the committee know why it's running late, but also to give an update on some good news with our audit as well and the fiscal responsibility of the city. And then moving forward, perhaps give staff a little bit of an eye on what we might expect, where we're at exactly right now, and just have the staff be able to think about some strategies and tactics should COVID turn worse, or should we go back into shelter in place and what those implications are, and to give us an idea moving forward over the next couple of months for when the new city council is seated and we have another one of these committee meetings, so that we can just bring some ideas to that committee meeting and to that council to make sure that we are financially stable in the future. So it's all about getting ahead of the curve on this, and that's what I'd like to discuss and like to look at today. And this is my first one of these committee meetings, so that's where I'm at. I guess I would want to first, unless there's some administrative or procedural things, turn this over to Roberto for an overview of the audit and where it stands, and what the although the numbers are not final, and I want that to be known, they're not final, but it's a good possible outlook on where our audit stands.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we do that, because this is the first time we're doing it this way, I'd like to go out to the public and see if there are any comments on, Acting City Manager Hoyne just introduced what we'll be discussing. If there's any public comments. I am seeing no hands at this time, so what I'll do is turn it back over to Roberto.
Mayor Kerr, members of the committee, Robert Moreno, Senior Advisor with Regional Government Services. I've been assisting the city with its budget and finance and accounting for a number of years on my own. Now I'm part of the RGS team, so still the same person, same work, just under a different company title. This is a little bit different from the finance committees we've had in the past, because typically we've had the audit ready to review with you, going and then coming to the board, to the council. Due to COVID-19 and some issues with the transition, it's been a lot of changes. The audit is taking a little bit longer to complete. It will be finished for the January board meeting, but because of the holidays, everything is being moved up this month. So we wanted to give you an idea of what to expect for the actual final audit report. And as Acting City Manager Hoyne mentioned, wanted to give you an update on where how things are looking right now. So we're doing a big picture type review. We're not getting into all the details, unless if you want to, we can, but we want to look at the big picture. So I'm going to share my screen, and first I apologize. Typically you get all the financial information ahead of time for you to review. This time you didn't. So I like to take my time and make sure that everybody understands the numbers that are on the screen. If you have any questions, by all means, please do so, and we will certainly make the information available to you. It's just that I was working at it even up to last night a little bit, trying to get some of these numbers in place. So let me share my screen. And if I can find the right button. There we are. Okay, so in front of you is let me know if this is not what you're seeing. It's the statement of revenue and expenditures for the general fund for last fiscal year, July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. This is at a summary level. Basically, the first column is a current period actual, which is the actual fiscal year. If we look at the total revenue, it came in at 4.7. We were budgeted at 5 million. So basically, we're 94.26% of what was actually budgeted. Most numbers came in quite well. The main area, as you can see, property taxes came in a little bit higher. Other taxes, which is the main area the city suffered in a little bit, is the sales tax and cannabis tax. And it was expected when COVID-19 happened that it was those two were going to take a little bit of a hit because people were not shopping as much, and the cannabis, there's been other dispensaries opening up in the area also. But beyond that, most revenues came in as expected. But so revenues came in at 4.7. If we look at let me move a couple of things off my screen here so I can, okay. And then the expenditure side came in at 4.4 million. It was budgeted at 4.9. So that's good. Everything pretty much came in under budget. And that meant that for the year, there is a surplus of 278,000 versus originally budgeted to about 35,000. The main savings you can tell is in the capital improvement, and these are the steps that the city took. We had a budget of 230,000. Projects were put on hold as soon as COVID-19 happened to try and make sure that there would be sufficient funding in spite of what was happening, because we expected a downturn in sales tax and sales tax being the biggest one, but also the cannabis tax, and weren't too sure what else to expect. So the good news is that for the year, the city did end up in a surplus position, which sad to say is not the case with a lot of other agencies. And then one other number, which we'll come back to in a little bit. So the general fund came in that well. The one other number that you're going to see in the audit is this big number here. Other financing sources and uses, it's an increase of 4.4 million. Now, the thing is that is not cash, but that is an increase in the value to the city of the land that the city held from FORA. Up until the point that FORA dissolved, there was a value on the books of that land, and half of that value was to go to FORA upon sale, which is what happened in the past. The property sold, half of it went to FORA. Now that FORA is dissolved, that half, which is a 4.4 million, will no longer be going to FORA. That now belongs to the city. Now, it is not an asset as in cash, but it is an asset because it is land held for resale, as opposed to the land that the city hall sits on. That one there's no value to it. It cannot, I mean, unless the city sells the city hall, has no value monetarily wise that can be spent. But this will, when the property is sold, the city, at least on an accounting basis, will have gained another 4.4 million. And it is something that sits on the balance sheet of the general fund. But and just so we don't get sidetracked with this number, the big thing is this 278,000. The city did come in much better. Well, basically, it's not much better. It did what was expected. The city manager, when things started, looked at the numbers and decided we needed to put a halt on things. Council agreed. And fortunately, this is where we ended up right now. It's about $200,000 surplus. Any major questions on these numbers as yet, Mayor Kerr?
Yeah, I had a couple of things looking at the numbers as you were strolling through, and I know we're looking at a high level, but the bank service charges seem crazy
Yeah.
to me.
No, so there's the audit is not wrapped up because there were some accounting transactions that are being fixed. So that's why I've been working on fixing some of those. That is not really bank service charges.
Okay.
It charges ended up in that account, but they're not bank service charges. So we're still moving a few numbers around, trying to get it all wrapped up this week. But it's not going to change the total expenses. It's just where things are categorized. And I just ran out of time. Just the same as payroll expense, you see a negative 188. And then the capital improvement, you'll see a negative 7,512. We're just cleaning up some of the expenses, but they're not, it's where they belong. The total is not going to change. It's still $4.4 million in expenses.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, they are in the wrong category. And unfortunately, that's just due to lack of time on my part and on some accounting issues. It
Okay.
will be cleaned up by the time you get the final one.
No worries. This is why we have the meeting, right?
Yep.
The other thing, and I know we're not going to focus on this, but I just have a point of clarity or a question. The FORA number, the 4.6 million, that's based on the property that is remaining?
Yes. The
Okay.
Yeah, right
And
now.
so how did we guesstimate that piece of property was worth 9.2 or 8. Yeah.
That was done a long time ago. That doesn't mean that is the value right now. That number was placed on the books a long time ago. There's a lot of documentation on how they went about it, but it's an old number. So it will, that's when you actually sell the property, it'll be on whatever the negotiated price is.
Thank you. Dennis. Dennis, did you have a
Thank you.
question?
Yes, I do. I have wanted to help clarify. So that number, that 4.4 or 4.5 million is, it represents what we would have had to pay to FORA had we sold property at, say, $9 million. They would have gotten 50% of the money, the FORA. So it's just a book entry. As Roberto points out, the property will be worth whatever we can get for it. And many years ago, when we were working with, at the time, Infantino and his group, the property was valued at $17 million, the entire 365 acres. Of course, we've sold some of it now to the developers, the Craniacs, and that leaves some other property that still belongs to the city, and whatever we sell it for, we sell it for. I hope that doesn't confuse anybody, and I hope it clarifies it a little bit. The other thing I wanted to comment on was ask Roberto, is this entirely a cash budget? There's no depreciation in your expenses?
Okay, so this is this report here is what's called, and I hate to get into the accounting legalese of governmental accounting, but this is a statement of revenue and expenditures, not expenses, just expenditures, which is money just kind of going out. That's the way governmental funds are budgeted and accounted for. In the audit, there will be what's called a government-wide statement that does take into account depreciation. All the capital improvements will be capitalized. Everything that's capitalized will be depreciated. It's a different accounting treatment. But for the general fund, this is the way it's accounted for.
So we can, if I was to look at the cash statements, then in the audit, I'll see that there was $278,000 net increase to our cash positions.
Basically, almost, except this is where accounting gets a little confusing. And for the governmental side, it is that it's an increase in current assets, not just cash, because some of this are receivables. Some of the revenue is receivables within the first 60 days at the end of the year. But bottom line, that's basically what it amounts to, is about $278,000 increase in cash. But receivables are taken into account and accounts payable are taken into account.
Okay. And when do you expect that we'll be able to take a look at the draft audit report?
The council meeting, remind me, when is the date for the council meeting in January, Karen? Because I think we're aiming for like January the 26th, so by around January the 15th or so, the draft should be ready to start circulating, if not sooner.
Okay. I think that covers my questions for now.
Great. Any other committee members? Questions, comments?
Mayor, I just would
Yes,
like
please.
to point out we have some elected members as well as regular council members. So if we can keep this at a higher level overview without direction or much discussion. I just want to make sure we're not doing anything Brown Act wise with electeds and everything else, and just be very cautious of that. That's the only thing I'd like to say. And at this point, one other thing. I would like to point out there was a lot of discussion about it last budget cycle, but we did have some personnel savings as well. I think that's about a third of our savings, Roberto, if I'm not mistaken. We had capital improvement stuff that we put aside, but we also did personnel things, which was about the projected savings we did with police department budget cuts and some other things. So.
Any other questions, comments?
Did the airport pay us 100% of what they owed us?
Yes.
Yeah, they pay on a monthly schedule, so I think they're up to date.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public, taking into account acting city manager's caution? All right, seeing no hands. Roberto, thank you for, sorry. Louise?
Yes, I'm trying to work with two screens because I have a new monitor and it's taking me a minute. I seem to recall that the airport owed us some extra funds. Was that also collected? I don't want to say extra funds, but there was some $10,000 or $12,000 in.
Yeah, I believe, and Roberto can correct me, but what we did is we folded that into into this year's monthly payment costs.
Yes.
To make up for that. So they paid for it in a monthly installment program, and that increased the monthly cost by $1,000 or so, and we should be up to date with that.
Yes.
Was that it, Louise? Okay. Roberto, please.
Okay, so last fiscal year, we ended up with a slight surplus, 278,000. We were going to end up barely breaking even. So we want to bring you to this current year now that we're in. So this is, actually, let me take a step back. So this is the general fund. This is a one-page summary of the general fund. Just to quickly review, that's not the only fund the city has. That's the biggest one. The other funds the city has is the gas tax fund, which is gas tax revenues that are collected. 41,000 was collected. 14.5 was spent on street-related items, storm, let's see, it's street sweeping and street utilities. So the gas tax fund ended up with a surplus of 26,900. The other fund the city has is SB1 monies. Senate Bill 1, again, it's gas tax related. 37,900 came in. It hasn't been budgeted for anything just yet. This comes in slowly each year, so it's being built up for a street project. It can only be used on streets. It can't be used on anything else. The same as gas tax can only be used on streets. So that fund is doing fine.
I have a question on that
certainly.
one.
Yes.
Okay, Louise.
Sorry. I seem to recall that the SB1, we've already got some 800,000, and basically this is being
Yes.
used to pay back the 800,000 that we used for that big street repair project.
Okay, so just one point of clarification. It's not the SB1. It's the next one down that I'm coming to. It's the Measure X
Okay.
is the one that you're talking about.
Okay.
And yes, that one, all the money has been received. It was an $860,000 loan. It's all been put into the streets. Now, all the money is going into debt service. This $52,946 is repayment back to TAMC, and that money is coming from the sales tax that would otherwise be given to the city under Measure X. But going forward, Measure X, all you're going to see is a little, probably about 50 to 60,000 in revenue, and that's going to make principal payments. The city will not have any use of that money. I think it's at least 10-year time period to pay back the loan, but the money's already in the streets, and the streets have been improved. But Measure X, that's the one that you're talking about. The final construction period was in 1920 for that money, and that money's all spent. The other fund is, okay, so now at the end of the year, the city has new funds that did not exist before. We have the Fora Habitat Management Fund, where the city got $775,853 from Fora for the habitat, and that's in a special revenue fund to be used only for that purpose. So that money is just sitting there, came in at the very end of the year. It's sitting there for now. We'll see during budget discussions if that's to be used at all or not. The other fund that the city now has is SBR Engineering Fund, South Boundary Road. The city got $518,000 from Fora to be used for the engineering. That's a Whitson contract that was already in place. You took the contract. Right now, because it happened at the very end of the year, it was just the money that came in. Now there's expenses that will be coming out to pay Whitson, and the money, those expenses will be coming out of this fund. So that's 518, and that can only be used for that, nothing else. Then we have another fund, it's the South Boundary Road General Jim Moore intersection. And this is where the city received $1 million from Fora, but this money went into an escrow account. It's sitting in escrow for the construction of that intersection. So that money will sit there until the time comes for that money to be spent. And one more is this other construction fund, the South Boundary Road Actual Construction Fund, where the city received $7.2 million for the construction of South Boundary Road. And that money is also sitting in an escrow account until it's time for it to be used. So the cities, when you get the final audit report, the balance sheet for the city has grown tremendously because of all these monies that are sitting there. Just keep in mind, they are set aside for specific purposes, not for general city operations. Any questions on those items before I move to the current year?
Any commission members?
No, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Any
All right.
public comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll go back to Roberto.
Okay, so now we come to the current fiscal year. July 1 through October 31st. We haven't quite finished all of the November banking transactions. So through October 31st, keep in mind that's 4 months. That's 33% of the year is where we're at as of October 31st. So if we look at revenue again, we're at almost 1.4 million on a budget of 4.1. We're at 33.38%. So overall, in total, we're tracking right where we should be. It just happens to be that way because, as you'll notice, property taxes have not come in, and those won't come in until December. But we only get those a couple of times a year. But other monies are coming in ahead of schedule. But the big picture is that we are at 33% revenue for the year, which is where we should be. The big question in my mind is just how the sales tax is going to work out because of the things that the state did to allow folks an extension of time. You may recall sales tax that were due in that fourth quarter. Well, April through June, the March sales tax that were due in April, the state allowed people to extend that out. And so some of those payments are still coming in. It may improve the city sales tax situation, but depends on what happens with this next round of COVID-19. If the state does something else, and sales tax are again probably going to be affected. But the good thing is revenues are tracking at 33%, which is where they should be. The expenses.
Can I ask you a question about revenues before you move to expenses?
Sure.
Cannabis tax.
Yep.
First of all, a curiosity question. Are they still required to pay us in cash rather than, can they do banking? Now that the federal government has said cannabis is no longer a federal crime to deal with cannabis?
Did it pass both? I thought it just
Yeah,
passed the House.
Okay, maybe that's true. I don't know. I don't know whether the Senate had voted on it or not.
Most of our cannabis companies do pay with check.
Check. Thank you.
And I have a question
Okay, go ahead, Louise.
on the deferred taxes, whether they be property taxes or whether they be sales taxes that the state deferred, not eliminated. Would those be credited in the year paid or in the year that they were normally due?
So basically it ends up being the year paid. The accounting treatment, it allows for revenue that's collected within 60 days of the end of the year to be counted against last fiscal year. But once it goes beyond 60 days, it's considered deferred revenue. It doesn't count anymore, even though you will receive it. It's an accounting thing. Now, that for these statements, for the general fund, well, actually, it's going to be in the year paid. Normally, for the general fund, we would accrue it, but the thing is, we have no idea how much has actually been deferred. Only the state knows that.
Thank you, state.
It has no
Thank you.
idea how much.
So Roberto does a good job in giving us breaks to ask for questions. So if we could hold off on our questions for all at once, please. Roberto.
Okay, so revenues, as you can tell, we're on track. Expenses, 1.3 million in expenses, $3.9 million budget. We're just slightly ahead on the expenditure side. Two main things to keep in mind with regards to this. One is that there are certain expenses that the city pays at the beginning of the fiscal year. Workers' comp and liability are paid in big chunks at the very beginning, not on a monthly basis. So that happens up front. Payroll and benefits, that's why this one is up a little bit more. And there's been some savings because there are positions that are not filled. But like I said, we do have some large expenses at the very beginning of the year that will then equalize throughout the year. There are also some other supplies that are purchased at the beginning of the year. And for the most part, everything is tracking. Capital projects, of course, any improvements are it's a large, it's not like a daily ongoing expenses. Those happen. There's 183,000 that has been paid out, but that project will be done, and then that's it. The expenditure side is not as easy to track on an ongoing monthly basis as the revenues are. But the bottom line is we are only at 35, and now that some of the major expenses have been paid at the beginning of the year, that curve will slow down a little bit. I don't know, Chief, if there's anything else you want to add on the expenditure side.
No, only that part of the reason for this meeting is to give everyone an idea of where we're at, and then also understand that your staff sees that there's not necessarily the light at the end of the tunnel yet. So we're going to take that into consideration moving forward, whether it's capital projects or, you know, payroll or how we deploy our police department, all those things. We just want to be ahead of the curve to finish this year like we did what it looks like we're going to finish last year, and have a positive outlook even with all this craziness going on.
So as budgeted, you know, if everything stays, we would have a surplus of about 246,000. It's going to just depend on the revenues, and I can tell you the cannabis has dropped. There are, as we mentioned, more dispensaries in the area now. At the beginning, Delray Oaks was kind of the first one out of the gate, so Delray Oaks got a large chunk of change at the very beginning, but now it's starting to slow down, and that's one of the reasons that it was decided back when not to spend all of that money, because we're not too sure how long it's going to keep. You don't want to get used to spending at a certain level if it's not going to be coming in at that level. But it did help me up a few things. Yep.
Roberto, if I can, just so everyone knows, we have had conversations with some of our vendors in the city, you know, Grow Innovations and others. MBAM, as you've probably seen, the new owners are really running with that place. They're cautiously optimistic. Given what's going on, there is some expansion in the market, and it's not so much the regular market that impacted them. They seem to believe it was they're still dealing with the health scare from vaping and things like that, but they are cautiously optimistic, and so you know, we're cautiously optimistic for them as well. But just to give you enough, since cannabis is such a large portion of our revenue right now, just wanted to add that.
So, I mean, the general fund is the only one really wanted to focus on, because the other funds, there's not much there. The last thing I did want to just share with you with regards to what was mentioned, that because the city's biggest sources of revenue are the sales tax and cannabis tax. So this is just on last year's numbers. So you can see property taxes at 630, sales tax, the original sales tax, the 1%, that's what cities always had, was budgeted at 430, came at 361. And then the two tax measures that the city has were budgeted at 800. They actually came in at 846 because this number was adjusted downward. The big one after that then is cannabis. It was budgeted at 725, came in at 637. And just a refresher, at one point, this thing was up to about 900,000, but we're down from the peak of 900-some thousand to 637,000. Just something to be mindful about, because these are the biggest right here. You know, we're talking 2.5 million of the city's revenues in those four sources of revenue. And those are the ones that we'll be monitoring and doing a little bit more analysis exactly on what's going on, and we'll try and see if we can find out from the state. It's a little hard to see how much sales tax has actually been deferred that we can expect to collect this year. So those were the main things we wanted to share. Any specific questions or things that you want us to report back on too?
Any commission members have questions? Nope.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand and unmuting myself here.
Okay.
I was looking at the financial reports from the last city council agenda package. And it looks to me like our, and let me see, this was through October 31st. So obviously things have been updated since then, but it looks like we were pretty much on track and maybe a little bit ahead. Well, we were considerably ahead when you look at the sales tax add-on number. We're behind on the cannabis, but we're pretty much on track for general sales tax revenue against our budget for the current fiscal year. Is there any update to that? Is that pretty much continuing on, Roberto, on that trend?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as you see it there. The number did change a little bit. We found one posting error, so we fixed it, but it doesn't change the overall total between the two. It was one that should have been a sales tax, not an add-on. That's why I think you mentioned at one point that the sales tax seemed to be a little on the low side compared to the add-on.
Yeah.
So it was a correction that we just made since that report was
Okay.
done.
Then that makes more sense. I couldn't figure out why our sales tax add-on was so much higher. So thank you.
Louise,
I know that MBAM was sold. Was there a period where they were closed, where we wouldn't have had any revenue from them? No? Okay.
No.
Thank you.
any other commission members? Okay, I'll go out to the public. Scott?
Yeah, so with the cannabis, the decrease in cannabis revenue, is there any way to tell how much of that is actually deferred tax as opposed to just actual decreases in their revenue?
Deferred tax or deferred, your question was about deferred tax?
Yeah, so the revenue the decrease in cannabis revenue that we're experiencing, are we able to differentiate between that being just deferred tax that they haven't paid yet, and that's why there's a decrease, or is it actual just decrease in their revenue?
We can certainly look for the answer to that. I know the city, Dino had brought something forward to the council for some consideration, but I don't recall what the outcome was or if anybody was given the opportunity to defer some of their tax during COVID-19. But we can certainly come back with that information. I mean, it's a good point. We will take that into account to see if there is some more revenue that may be coming in.
There's also, in regards to the cannabis, there's also at least one other entity that is still getting up and running. So that could potentially be additional income that we haven't budgeted for.
So I guess, do we know if we've allowed any of our cannabis businesses to defer their sales tax?
So, Mayor, if I may, so on the sales tax, we don't know. The state handles that. On the cannabis tax, I don't know if Karen might know if the cannabis tax has been allowed or not.
I would have to look into it. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked either or, cannabis or sales tax. Have we allowed any of those cannabis businesses to defer?
You know, one of the things, you know, I know we have a rent deferral with one of the folks who is renting out the old Public Works building. That's interesting. That's something, Scott, good point. I'll educate myself on is the difference between the sales tax and the cannabis tax and in the deferral, and whether or not any of that cannabis tax counts as a sales tax deferral. And then I can have an answer for that shortly.
Okay. There is a $48,000 contract with one of the cannabis companies that wants to expand that has been extended, or the contract has been, I mean, the beginning of the contract has been extended until the financial situation is a little better. So that's going to equate to some portion or all of $48,000 that was budgeted for income. So we'll have to look at that at mid-year. But I don't know the answer to your deferred tax. That would be interesting to know. So hang on, Louise, let me finish with the public first.
Well,
I know
I
we're
wanted
used to
to-
having a conversation.
Okay, but I wanted to comment on that.
I
There
know.
was a question.
Hang on just
Okay.
a second. So any other public comment? Okay, let's bring it back. Louise, thank you.
I do recall that we at the council voted, I want to say April or May, to allow cannabis businesses to defer, but I believe the one business that was interested decided not to. Because we had put some caveats and conditions on the deferral, and they felt that it was more time and money to meet those, or to arrange to meet those, than they would be gaining by deferring their tax. But that's my recollection, and I think it was about the same time that we did the eviction thing and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think it was April or May.
Any other comments? So it sounds like, Roberto, can you bring that back to our next finance committee meeting?
We certainly will.
February? Okay, thank you. Are there any other points to cover? Roberto?
Yes. Roberto.
Hang on, Dennis. Roberto.
Not from my perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dennis?
Did you have a current balance sheet information? I'm always interested in how the city is doing with cash. And I know you've told us that there's those specific amounts of money in the reserve accounts, and but I don't, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, so the balance sheet it's still in a draft form. There's a couple of changes that are being made again to adjust for some entries. I didn't want to put it out there because sometimes those things just create more questions than answers, even though it's all there. We will definitely bring it back to the next committee meeting, and maybe we could probably even start presenting balance sheets later on for the monthly financial reports, if that's something the council would be interested in. Currently, it's just the cash. That's all that's shown on the monthly reports, because there's more items on the balance sheet than just cash.
Cash is king.
Well, I appreciate between you and Karen and Kim having all of the various accounts, pots of money that we have separated out, because it's helpful for people to understand what is allocated for a particular project and what is general fund. So thank you for doing that. Anything else? Acting city manager, anything from your perspective?
Nothing budgetary. I just, for the public's consumption and council and everyone else, City Hall is closed. We're dealing with some COVID-related issues, and it makes it difficult with our small staff and our small quarters and stuff like that. Most staff will be working from home unless absolutely necessary for like packet preparation and things like that. Police department's open. That will all continue. We'll answer emails, we'll answer the phones. Just be patient if you don't get an answer on the first call. And then I'm gonna give a shout out to Randy really quick. He's become a very valued part of our member. He's running, or a member of our team. He's running tech for us on most of these meetings. And if you look at the beautiful logos with the rotating City Hall stuff, he's really upping our marketing game. So I just want to say thanks to him, and and I appreciate him and Karen.
Round and round.
It's difficult, and they're working very hard to keep services running. So Karen and Randy, thank you, and Council and Mayor, thank you for your understanding of what we need to do to keep people safe here.
Got it. Louise, you're muted.
Sorry. I wanted to thank Roberto and for the hard work, and more hard work to continue. Numbers are crunching every which way. Also want to thank Karen and Kim in absentia, and Jeff and Randy for all their hard work and modifying how they work and where they work, and still making our city a great city. Thank you all.
Thanks, Louise. Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Roberto and Chief, is there any money left in the Measure X funds? Because there are some places I've noticed in walking around the city and driving around the city. For example, on Via Verde, as you come up to the top of the hill, there's trees there. The roots from those trees had undermined the road, and that was something that I don't know, our engineer did not catch, or somebody didn't catch when the road was being resurfaced. There was no work done to repair the uplifting being created by the roots. So I'm wondering if there's any money left in the fund to go around. There may be other places around the city too that were missed and need attention.
Roberto, you might know, I think there's a small limited amount. I was on the phone with Tamsi and had a meeting, and they sent me some documents. I believe it's Measure X, but it's a limited amount. I don't know the exact amount. Roberto might be able to speak to that better.
Okay, so the Measure X money is all spent already on the streets. The loan amount that they gave, it's all spent, and now all the Measure X money is going to go to repay them. So there's no more Measure X per se from that one. At least from, yeah, the county, Tamsi has other Measure X money that the city might want to try and tap into, but as far as the city's allocation, that's all spent already. There is SB1 money that's adding up, and there's also gas tax money. So those two are only street-related items, so we could take a look at those other than the general fund. Those are the only other two.
Okay, well, somebody has to make a decision and as to whether or not, how severe these problems are, but they're quite noticeable. If you drive up Via Verde and look at the right-hand side as you're coming up the hill from Canyon 218, you'll see some rather large lumps in the road, and I believe that they're worthy of attention. And again, I say there may be other places around the city that also got overlooked and are equally deserving of attention. So if there's any street work to be done, I hope that we identify the funds and can address those.
Dennis, we'll go out today and look at them. I'm in City Hall. I promise you I'll go up Via Verde today. And
Thank you.
And I'll look into the funding issue.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. It can be put on our wish list. So before we close, I just want to let the public know that traditionally this meeting, we have the Finance Committee meets in late November, early December to discuss the audit. And then in February, we discuss mid-year. And then in May, June timeline, we discuss the next year's budget. So on that note, I'm not seeing any hands. We're adjourned. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.